Hello everyone, it's Paola. So I apologize for my kind of weird voice. I'm kind of sick, and somehow my voice is going, as it always does. Anyway, I am doing another artist series video, and I'm very excited about it because it's about Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol is a staple of the New York art scene and New York art history. And now that I live in New York, I thought it would be cool to talk about him. Also, before we get further into this, I would like to say that if you are not subscribed, what are you doing? Subscribe. And also follow my Instagram. The link is in the description. It's at Paola Kassa. If you want to follow me, I post a lot on my stories and talk to you guys and have a lot of info about videos and stuff. So yeah, follow me there. We can talk, message me, whatever. And yes, that is all I have to say. Follow my Instagram. Let's get started. Okay, so Andy Warhol, what do we know about him? He was born in 1928 and he died in 1987. So his whole legacy, his whole art movement, which was basically his whole life, was basically the mid to latter half of the 20th century. And 20th century art has so many different movements and different art styles that there's so much stuff it's interweaving with each other. And obviously we'll get to that as we talk through this artist series about different artists, different art movements. His art movement that he is most known for is the pop art movement. So pop art has figures like Andy Warhol is up there as one of the pioneers, and there's Roy Lichtenstein, Klaus Oldenburg, if you want to look those people up, and yeah, Andy Warhol was a big name in that. He's a big name in 20th century art in general, modern art, contemporary art. He has some of the most notable images that people who don't even know art or art history would recognize, and they know oh, that's Andy Warhol. He was not only an art figure, he was also a pop culture figure, a culture figure. He was part of so many different things. So pop art, let's talk about that. So pop art started gaining popularity in the 1950s, and this was a big time of commercial industrialization, media, and that is really what pop art focused on. I mean, it literally is pop art, pop culture art, you know what I mean? But also it kind of makes sense with the look of it. It's very pop in your face, bright colors. It kind of all makes sense that it's called pop art, So pop art was really focused on celebrity, mass media, popular culture, what was going on. And that is very apparent in the images that we see, especially from Andy Warhol. So I think one of his most famous images that you guys probably know already, even if you didn't know who Andy Warhol is at all, is his Marilyn Monroe pictures. So Marilyn Monroe obviously was a huge actress in the 50s, and old Hollywood, she was an icon, and she still is. Everyone knows who Marilyn Monroe is. And he has these images of her in different colors, bright colors. It's very captivating, and that is such an iconic image for pop art and the pop art movement. Another image that is very famous from Andy Warhol that I think really embodies the pop art movement as well is his Campbell soup portraits. So those are drawings of Campbell soup can, and that is a really big part of pop art too, because pop art was sort of making the everyday exciting and just using commonplace things, or looking into branding, marketing, that media thing again, advertisement, and it's just sort of putting it in the forefront. So I think that is a really important image in the pop art movement, and this is why Andy Warhol was so good at it. So Andy Warhol studied pictorial design, which I'm not really sure what that is. I did a lot of research, but I didn't look up that. Don't know why. Don't ask me. Anyway, pictorial design, I'm assuming it's visual design or even graphic design, but this was back in the day. So when he studied that, he went into commercial illustration right off the bat, and he was working immediately in New York for Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, Glamour, doing all of this illustration work for really big publications. And so he already made a name for himself before he even went into the art space, him as himself an artist in galleries and presenting that way. It was like he was a big name in illustration and working in New York, and he was really making a name for himself in society and in like the fancy high society of New York with all the cool art people. And he really got there because he was really talented, and he struck a chord at that time because of his sketching style. It was very cartoonish, you know, he was into that like that vibe of just the advertisement vibe that was the 1950s that you can like imagine, like Mad Men, basically 1950s and 60s, basically that. So that was really his thing. He was great at it, and people recognized that. So basically, because he was in New York high society, he was a big part of Studio 54. I feel like it's synonymous with him. If you think of Studio 54, you think of Andy Warhol. If you think of Andy Warhol, you think of Studio 54. That was a huge club in the 50s and 60s, and it was like the coolest place, and it was the place where all the celebrities were, all the cool New York people, the artists, and there was a lot of drugs, a lot of things like that, but it was the place. And I feel like Andy Warhol was like kind of one of the leaders of all of those people because he had so much influence, especially in this art movement. Once he started getting into galleries, he became really successful in that, and people really flocked to him. And he had so many people around him all the time. He had so many assistants. Once he moved into a space that he called the factory, where he was just doing, you know, like silk screening, drawing. He had so many assistants. It's very assembly line kind of thing. And it was all in the factory. And he was so involved with people. And some other people did not like him very much. And he actually was shot. So yes, he was shot and he survived, which is crazy. He was involved in so many people's lives in all these crazy ways, as you can tell. So his work was really focused on, you know, mass production, branding, media, advertisement, pop culture, celebrity. He had an obsession with Hollywood, even though he was a big part of the New York scene. He had an obsession with films. He started making films later in life after he retired from visual art, which I don't think he really ever did. But he was making films. He was working with all of these celebrities, all of these actresses, all of these different people, and he always had muses, you know, and it was his thing. I mean, he was just a part of this like crazy celebrity society that I think of when I think of him. I don't just think of his visual art, I also think of him as this person, and it's so interesting to me because I don't get it. I'm not in that world, but seems so fascinating to me, and I just love learning about these kind of people. Like, I want to know what it was like in Studio 54, you know? Aren't you a little bit curious too? That's what I want to know. Andy Warhol really challenged people to consider what is art, because pop art really focused on the difference between high art and low art, you know, using everyday objects, using crazy colors, using weird methods to create your art. Can that be considered art? He was really pushing that boundary, and I think that's what a lot of contemporary art was doing in the 20th century. It was changing what people had always thought of as art, or what constitutes fine art. And I think he challenged that, and the pop art movement in general challenged that, because it was using so many different weird methods and aspects and Campbell's soup cans, you know? So I decided to create something inspired by Andy Warhol, and I decided to use photography because my drawing skills are not my favorite thing about my art, and I decided to photograph a camera, a disposable camera, because I like the colors and I want to manipulate the colors on Photoshop and do different versions and just create a piece that I thought would be cool and inspired by Warhol.
Don't come to me now, I don't want your love. Don't come to me now, I don't want your love. Don't come to me now.
But wait, that's not all I ended up doing. So I ended up getting on the subway and taking it into Midtown to find out some places that Andy Warhol used to hang out, because I am curious and I live in New York, and why not make the most of it for you guys? So I ended up at a place called Serendipity 3, which is a place that Andy Warhol apparently spent a ton of time at and a ton of money at, and he always got the frozen hot chocolate, which I guess is a big hit. And this place is super cute, super funky, and it's a really cool place that Andy Warhol used to go all the time. And then from there I walked on over to Studio 54, or what used to be Studio 54. So it's on 54th Street, obviously, and it is now a theater, but it was really cool to see, and honestly I could imagine exactly how it looked back in the day.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and let me know what other artists you want to see in the artist series in the comments below, please. I love suggestions. I love talking about artists. I love finding new artists. Art history is my favorite thing. Also, I've linked below in the description a video of art cooking, which is from the Art Assignment channel. There is an episode about Andy Warhol and has a lot of insight into his weird life and weird eating habits, and I find it really fascinating. So I've linked that below. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you have not already, and turn on the little notification bell so you can know when I upload. And I will see you in my next video and my next artist series. Bye!